Welcome back to the Bitcoin Zodiac. I'm Claire Marrinan, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Corinne Florence. For today's episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Aleksandar Svetski, a prolific writer and contributor to the Bitcoin community. Alek is an entrepreneur, author, co-author of the Uncommunist Manifesto with Mark Moss, and more recently, the co-creator of Spirit of Satoshi, which is the first Bitcoin-centric large language model AI. And also their soon-to-be released project, 21 Questions, which is the first book to be written collaboratively between AI and key figures in the Bitcoin community. Aleksandar Svetski, welcome to the Bitcoin Zodiac.
Ladies, thank you for having me on.
For sure, for sure. Let's get straight stuck into it because you really have been in Bitcoin for a very long time, from really the early days of Bitcoin, and you've written so much on the topic. So what was that first moment like? How did you find out about Bitcoin? How did you get drawn into the community? And how did you become interested in it, really?
I'm not sure if I was that early. Like,
Okay.
I kind of consider myself class of 2016, 2017.
Okay.
There's obviously people that were much earlier than me. I think I was just my personal character as a person was more inclined to fall down the rabbit hole quickly. So
Mm.
I kind of caught up where most people might have spent 1, 2, 3, 4 years sort of getting deep into Bitcoin and maybe writing something about it or producing something about it. I just kind of like dove in. And
Yeah.
I don't know what that was. Maybe it was like a mixture of factors. The fact that I had just finished up a business, like a little startup that we were trying to use personality profiling to match people to work. And it was a really cool idea, but we were way too undercapitalized as a business, and also how can I say, I was young and inexperienced, so I didn't know how to really build a business. So that failed, and it kind of left me in a position where I was like, okay, what do I do with my life now? And that's when, and I still recall, I started going to these, like, I went to a conference about Internet of Things. I went to a conference about like, electronics and stuff like that. And I was trying to find like, what's the next thing that I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole on. And it was very intentional. It was like definitely something I was looking for, something to go down a rabbit hole on. Like I wanted to work on something. And it happened by accident, actually. It was a friend who he's this sort of degenerate junkie, basically. Super funny guy, but like literally we called him Hoover, like because he had a skill of like just snorting things. And anyway, I don't know if this is a PG rated or
No, no,
M
you can
rated
say
show.
whatever you like. We're
All
censored
things
free
go.
here.
Okay, so he's like, bro, have you heard about this thing called Bitcoin? He's like, like his family was very rich, so he's like this
Mm.
degenerate living in like this lap of luxury on Darling Harbour, beautiful apartment, like one of the most expensive apartments in Darling Harbour. And I'm like, you fucking degen. And I said, yeah, I've heard about Bitcoin. And he's like, bro, he made like, $1 million and all this sort of thing. He put 20 grand in, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Then I remember looking at the price at that time, and it was something like $500 or whatever. And I remember because I was a gold bug many years before that. So I got into gold and silver around 2009, 2010. And I was a rabid, like, hard money guy, gold and silver, Mike Maloney, Doug Casey, Kiyosaki, all these sort of guys. And I remember who, but I remember somebody talking about Bitcoin, and it could have been Max Kaiser jumping up and down on a couch, yelling at people. It was something like that. And I remember just thinking, oh yeah, Bitcoin, whatever, like internet funny money, I'll stick with my gold and silver. So like I wrote it off. And this is sort of 2011. I didn't give a shit, 2011, 2012, whatever. And it wasn't until this degen friend of mine started mentioning, yabbering on about it, that I looked at it again, and I just, something about me, I looked at it, I was like, damn, man, wasn't this like a couple dollars back when I first saw it? Now it's like $500. Like I should have just bought some and retired. So that kind of sucked me in a little bit. And this is, I think, really important about Bitcoin, is that because it's an economic beast and because it kind of has the allure of making money, it gets people attracted. And yeah, for me at that stage of my life, I definitely, on the surface, I was about, how do I make money? that's what I want to do. And Bitcoin seemed to be a vehicle for that. And then, of course, as you start peeling the onion, you start to realize that there's something more here. And, I've always been, I don't know how to put it, like sensitive to government overreach, injustices, lies, all that sort of stuff. Like I've always had just like some sort of trigger around that.
Yeah.
And the more I dug into it, you kind of couple a few factors together, right? I was looking for something to sink my teeth into. I was looking to make money. I was primed already as a previous gold bug, silver bug. I already had the proclivity towards wanting to, see things done right, be just. I had a bit of an allergic reaction to the government already. So like I had all of these sort of ingredients, and yeah, within Bitcoin, I found something that tied all of the pieces together. And I went down the rabbit hole very quickly, actually. I went into shitcoining very early on. I messed around with all the ICOs. I remember having like a Bitcoin account on Bittrex, and I started out with like 4 or 5 Bitcoin on there. And at the time, it was worth like 7 or 8 grand, and I traded my way up to $20,000. So I was like, yes, I tripled my money. But then I looked at the amount of Bitcoin, and it was like, 0.9 of a Bitcoin. So like
Mm.
my Bitcoin holding went down, but my US dollar holding went up. And that was, one of the sort of first visceral reactions I had. I was like, man, shitcoining is really, 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 really fucking dumb. Like I just spent all this time and energy like trading like a monkey, like sitting there reading white papers and trying to figure out like all of the nuances and the token economics and all this sort of stuff. Like I had white papers coming out of my ear at the time. And yeah, I realized I climbed Mount Stupid, realized there was nothing but idiocy up there, and I ran back down, and I became Bitcoin maxi very early. And I think I was one of the first Bitcoin maxis in Australia. There's probably like 3 or 4 of us. There was me, Stefan Livera, Rory Highside, probably Huss McCook, and John Pratt. Like there's probably 5, 6 like real hardcore Bitcoin maxis, and we kind of found each other. And yeah, anyway, that's the genesis story. And fast forward a
Yeah.
bunch of years, and here I am.
Yeah, so there are quite a few things that
Wow.
like collide there within. Was there anything particularly in the ideology as well behind Bitcoin and sort of Satoshi's vision for Bitcoin as well that really drew you in? I mean, I guess the whenever people ask me how I got into Bitcoin, I'm like, Bitcoin had me at fuck the system. Like that was the first thing that like drew me in and really interested me. And so what was it about Bitcoin's ideology that sort of, really took you from that point where you're like, hey, I can make money here to like, oh, there's something really serious going on here.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what you just said. So it's kind of that Matrix meme, right? Is like, when Morpheus says to Neo is like, you've got that splinter in the back of your mind, something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it and all this sort of stuff. And I would credit a lot of that discovery phase to Andreas Antonopoulos, who was someone I listened to religiously in the early days, and I just discovered something there. My thinking has evolved a little bit, or quite a bit, since then. Obviously, like I guess when I was younger, I was a bit more of a definitely like Rage Against the Machine, fuck the system, burn it all down. But now I'm a little bit different on that, and we can go into why I've sort of changed and evolved my opinion there.
Yeah.
But it definitely was that piece. It was like I already had my issues with authority, which once again, that's another thing I've changed. Like I've become uh, uh I've become pro-authoritarian, these days, but I'm anti-totalitarian. So there's a strong nuance there, and we can go into the etymology of those words, etc., later. But like now, I think what the world is fundamentally lacking is authority. So we don't like back then. You would have heard me saying things like, I'm a freedom maximalist and anti-authoritarian, and like, we need to create a better world for everyone and all this sort of stuff. And now I'm like, fuck the lemmings. We need authoritarianism. I love 80/20. hierarchy all the way. Like, so I've evolved my opinion on that. But yeah, early days, Andreas really captured my attention.
Yeah.
And yeah, the middle finger component of Bitcoin to the system, which is still fundamentally a part of its DNA, is very important because fundamentally we don't live in a authoritarian framework. We live in a, I'm going to make up a word now, in a incompetarian framework, right?
Good word. We
Like
should add that.
literally, yeah, please do. Like we are in fucking clown show. The circus has arrived and they've, planted permanent tents, and that's what we're living in. And Bitcoin is like a piece of sanity in amongst the psychosis.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen that you've deep dived into research on history and the rise and fall of empires. And is that where everything kind of changed, by doing that research on history?
Yeah, over the last couple of years, I've come to understand, things that, and you know what, I've really come to understand that Bitcoiners are wrong on a lot of things. They're wrong on what Bitcoin's going to do in the world. They're wrong. Like I've got this, it is an unpopular opinion now, but I believe it'll be proven right. Is that I think Bitcoin will bring back feudalism, and people like get super triggered by that. They're like, no,
Can you define that?
Clearer classes in society.
Okay.
And because the thing is, fundamentally, you don't get rid of classes. There are classes. People are born for different things, and the older I get, the more I realize nature is more important than nurture. Doesn't mean that nurture is not important. We have epigenetics, but like sort of we are fundamentally predisposed to particular things. And in a feudal society, you had people who were bred to be warriors, people who were bred to be artisans, people who were bred to be peasants, people who were bred to be merchants. And it's very taboo to talk about these days, but people had these organic predispositions. You don't get the the little skinny nerd and put him in on a horseback with a knight armor and go put him out to fight. Like, it didn't make sense. So the people who were the warrior class in a feudal society, they were more brutish. They were more, they were the big chads basically. And we've distorted a lot of that today, and we have more of I guess a economic and financial feudalism these days, which is more driven through like this fusion of the merchant and the banker archetype, or the merchant and the trader archetype. And that's done a lot of damage. It's also done a bunch of good as well. And this is the thing about the world, is that things are too complex to just say it's purely bad or it's purely good. Like, there is always a silver lining, there's always nuance, there's always all that sort of shit. But yeah, to sort of, sorry?
No, nothing is so black and white, good or bad, black and white. There's always gray and complexity in there.
Exactly. So so to sort of tie it back to the original thing, it's like I've come to reinterpret actually, there is black and white. There is communism is bad. That's black.
Yeah.
and
agreed.
Beauty is white. Okay. So other than that, everything else has some nuance. The Bolsheviks sucked. But yeah, the truth of the matter is, yeah, my viewpoint on the world has fundamentally changed as I've understood civilization, society more, and how that's evolved. And really things that we think are good today aren't as good as we probably think they are, and things that we thought were bad previously probably weren't as bad. And I really genuinely believe feudalism is one of those things, is that you had more clarity in respect to where you are. Now, I think a future Bitcoin standard will be more what I'm sort of terming meritocratic feudalism, which is a little bit different. So that way you have the nature layers. Well, birth is important. Because you will be predisposed to certain things. And I know, for example, if when my kids are born, they are going to I'm going to look keenly as a parent to see what they are predisposed towards, and I want them to lean into that, versus try to say, oh, you should have all of the opportunities and you should go and spend 15 years in school trying to figure it out and learn everything that everybody else is learning, and kind of dull your core strength, right? Like if you are born to be an artisan, you're better off leaning into that early on. And this is actually feudalism, but people don't want to say this because, you know, the person who was born to the father who was the word Smith, right? The surname Smith comes from the class of people that were blacksmiths, you know, or some sort of artisans that built stuff. So they had that genetic predisposition towards that. Far better than somebody who had a knightly predisposition, who was someone who would be more likely to go to war. And so we will need to understand that, but we also need to understand that we are both genetic and epigenetic, which means we can evolve, nurture does matter, you know, we change, we can adapt, and we need to take that into account. And that doesn't mean that someone who is like, for example, my dad, he should definitely not be part of the upper echelons of the economic or merchant class. My dad, and I say this from a partly loving, partly detached place, is peasant stock. I will say that, like, he's good at just fucking working. He's not a very good business person. He would suck at delegating people. Every business that he's tried to run was a complete fucking disaster. You know, he tried to play, you know, had a period of life where he was a loan shark. He would lend money to people and then he'd spend the rest of his life chasing that fucking money like a moron, right? So like he tried, like his predisposition was towards one thing, but he tried to make himself something else and his life was full of suffering. Now, I have a different predisposition, despite being from my dad. You know, my mum is far more entrepreneurial, intelligent, all that sort of stuff. And she never really built her own business. I think if she ever did, she probably would have been successful. But there was obviously something there in my DNA, blood, whatever predisposition that I was able to capture and leverage. And plus the fact that when you start fusing genes and DNA and all this sort of stuff, things happen. Like my wife is a great example, is that she's very, 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 very different temperamentally, emotionally, physically speaking, than her whole family. She literally looks like she got fucking adopted in her family. So sometimes you have this thing that happens and you're like, where did you come from? Like literally all her life she got called defecto de fabrica, which means factory defect, but in a good way. Like but the thing is, like, because she's like incredibly special and beautiful, and you look at the rest of the family and it's like, you sure you came from this family? Like, because it doesn't actually make a lot of sense. So it's so anyway, without being called Hitler by the audience within the first 10 minutes of this conversation, I'll leave it there. I have unpopular opinions that have changed.
I think it's like an interesting sort of like, you know, it's a kind of example of really what happens. I think what we're experiencing at this point in time in society is what happens when we attempt to avoid pain. Like really, we instead of like looking at the hard stuff and going, hey, we need to tackle this head on. We need to appoint the people we need to appoint who are good at the job that can get this done. If you need to go to war, you go to war. If you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this. Because we've had experiences in the past where that has been unbalanced and there's been, you know, traumatic events. We're all from Australia. We, you know parts of our history. And we're doing this really weird attempting to fix that history. Whereas really like what we need to kind of do is like go, okay, we've got a business to run. We've got a country to run. Like we've got to get on with it. Whereas what we're sort of trying to do is is avoiding that pain and trying to create this like equal outcome. Instead of equal opportunity, we're trying to create equal outcome and this like mass mediocrity across the board. And sometimes that sounds nice. Even I have felt, you know, previously that, you know, oh, we need to like, you know, right our wrongs of the past and try and uplift these people and things like that. But really it's causing more problems and creating more problems than it's really solving, I think. So I feel like that's maybe what you're talking about, like, is this mass mediocrity is so against human nature. Like we're created to create, to be productive, to move forward, to build stuff, to, you know, establish stuff. And so when you were just, you know, handing out a gold star to everybody, this doesn't work. Like nothing gets created, and you sort of like mute other people's human nature and their desire to grow. There's no incentive there, I think.
Let me give you a metaphor before I radicalize you further. 'Cause I'm gonna radicalize you in a second. Okay. Metaphor. Creativity. Creativity is colorful, right? If you want to nullify creativity, turn everything into gray, right? So when I say creativity is colorful, creativity is made up of many different colors, hence the metaphor. You have red, blue, green, all this sort of stuff. And all of these colors are what? They're different. If you want to equalize the colors, take a color palette with a bunch of different colors and mix the shit all together, and you will get the color gray, which is the non-color, right? So this is what communism and equalitarianism of every kind leads to. Is it in order to in order to equalize the variance and the differential in people, it has to suck the life out of everything and flatline it. And a flatline is another word for you're dead, right? Like, so when you go to a the hospital, when something is fucking flat, it means it's dead, it means it's over, right? So like you want to kill society, you destroy variance and you equalize, right? So this is extremely important to understand. Now, to radicalize you, you mentioned quality of outcome is bad, but we should strive for equality of opportunity. Is that right?
Yes. I don't think we can ever create equality in opportunity either, but I do think that we should attempt to do so. That should be the direction that we head in.
Okay. You're almost there. So we'll never get it, and we actually shouldn't also try to get it either, because it's a fantasy. It's never going to happen. So let me ask you this.
I think though, if you aim for the stars, if you aim for the moon, you're going to land up on the stars. That's sort of like, I think, direction.
True, but equality of opportunity isn't the moon. So the equality of opportunity is the gutter, and I'll tell you why. So the only way to really get equality of opportunity is to nuke everything and start from scratch, basically. So the simple fact of the matter is, when we're born, we mentioned it earlier, we're born to different kind of parents. We're born with different genetics, we're born with different predispositions. We're born in different countries where the economic situation, et cetera, is different. We're born in regions with different resources, with different stuff like that, with different cultures, et cetera. So all of this sort of stuff is also going to be different. Fundamentally, the only way to really, 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 really get equality of opportunities, somehow, if we could take the world and spread all the resources, all the wealth, everything equally across all of the different places, so that people are born with the same access, the same kind of culture, the same, imagine one world, beautiful one world government with Klaus Schwab, who equalizes everything. So we've all got all the same stuff. And then,
but I think they're trying to,
you would have to grow
outcome. They're trying to impose, that's more the direction of equality of outcome.
The Trojan horse. So equality of opportunity has to, the predecessor for equality of opportunity is a line that is an equality of outcome first. So you need to get everything at the same starting line to create an opportunity for everybody. Finally, I'll say this, is that to really have equality of opportunity amongst humans, you need to create everybody in a test tube, so that we all have the same genetics, the same, predispositions, the same height, color, everything. So that way we all start off with the same stuff. And then we'll finally have equality of opportunity, but we also have Brave New World. So I think equality of opportunity is a total fucking scam. It is literally, it's very easy. Like, the way you get people confused is and they did this in Ireland right now, right? When they threw out the hate speech laws, they went something super egregious. They knew everybody would say fuck you to, and then they're like, oh,
acceptable.
Here's a slightly better one, and then people are like, yes, we won. It's like, well, no, you didn't. You just got stretched out. So equality of outcome is designed to make equality of opportunity sound palatable, but equality of opportunity is just the biggest scam as really what we should be focusing for is just eliminate the word equality altogether, like burn it, set fire to it. We need to be orienting towards, and this is the important word, excellence. And excellence implies variance Excellent implies hierarchy. Excellence implies difference. Excellence implies a separation from average. You face and orient civilization towards excellence. It is the 180-degree opposite to equality of all kinds. Opportunity, outcome doesn't fucking matter. Excellence is the complete opposite. That's what you orient for. You orient for that. You have a civilization that actually grows and reaches and stretches. It'll definitely have inequality, but that's okay, because we want inequality. It is just fundamentally the way of the world and everything. So that's my attempt to radicalize you.
Yeah, I think I think we're agreeing, but I think we're just saying it in a different way, because I think I do agree that there will always be inequality, but I think that inequality should come through merit. So basically, yes, it's not equal because that person is smarter than you, and so they've achieved more than you, and they've contributed more to society than you. That's where the inequality comes. I think the flip side of that is where we haven't maybe learned from our mistakes in the past, is that we're trying to sort of suppress people. So I obviously think that when I say equal opportunity, I don't think you should be held back because you're a woman. I don't think you should be held back because of race or gender, sexuality, etc. I think we should be more focused on merit-based.
Okay, let me give you one other word then. So what you're describing
I'm gonna get you to
is,
agree with me. It's gonna happen.
someone's gonna win. Someone's gonna win this battle. We are not equal. What you're describing there is fairness of the game, and this is also different to equality. So if you want a fair game, you will have an unequal result and basically an unequal matchup in the first place. So fairness and equality are fundamentally also diametrically opposed. Like the only way to get an equal result, even an equal setup in the beginning, is to create unfair rules. And the only way to get a fair result is to have unequal establishment and unequal rules. So that's a smaller nuance. That's how, like, I'm obviously more extreme these days because beyond fairness, I believe in excellence, because excellence even transcends fairness. Sometimes life isn't fucking fair, but if excellence is the goal, shit washes out. But closer to equality of opportunity is fairness. And I think, once again, I just want to be done with the word equality. The more we use that word, the more we operate within Overton window, which is a scam. And if we just move towards fairness, like that is really what we want. When you go play a game of football, sure, you could argue that the rules being the same for everybody on the field, you could argue that that is equality opportunity, but fundamentally the accurate definition there is that is a fair game with transparent rules that everybody knows and they go into. And the goal of the fucking game is to beat the opponents and have an unequal outcome. Like, that's literally the goal. So that's what we want. We want a civilization where we play fair games. Fair games trump any form of equality. And if we're talking semantics, so to tie it back to you, as you said, we're kind of describing this in different ways, which is correct. To some degree, we're talking about semantics here. What you're really saying is fairness, and I think what I'd like to put forward is that we start all pushing everybody to use fairness instead of equality as the framing. We want fairness. We want fairness, not equality.
Yeah. And I guess that's where Bitcoin comes into that as well, because
Yes.
that's really the focus. I mean, that's probably one of the most interesting things for me about Bitcoin, is that really creates not a level playing field, because obviously if you have more dirty dollars, you can buy more Bitcoin. But
even if you have more clean dollars, you can buy more Bitcoin.
well, but the fact is that the rules are clearly defined, and they're not skewed in one direction or the other. Yeah.
This is a great analogy. So see, even Bitcoin is definitely not a quality of outcome. Even it's not a quality of opportunity, because not everybody had the same opportunity to buy Bitcoin. You were born in different places, but Bitcoin is extremely fair because it doesn't care. There's nobody that can rearrange how much you got, when you got in, all that sort of stuff. So like this is where and I think Bitcoin's a great example of the slight nuance between equality of opportunity and fairness. Like they are really close in definition and semantics, but fairness is really, 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 really what we want, because that is what creates the games that civilization is built on. And yeah, I think Bitcoin is interesting to me because it's fair. The way it was released to the world was fair, because there was no better way to release it to the world. Like, we're not going to go do what WorldCoin is doing and just scan everybody's fucking iris. Like, Bitcoin was released when it was released, how it was released, the people that got it. Like, sometimes I think, like, because I've met some really early OG Bitcoiners, and they're complete monkeys, honestly. Like, I'm like, what the fuck? And I think to myself, I'm like, damn, bro, like, I actually feel pissed off about it. Like, why do they have 10,000 Bitcoin and I have a fraction of that, and they're complete retards?
Yeah.
But you know what? Like,
Yeah.
that's fair, and also it's just the way the cookie
Game.
crumbles. And that's exactly that is the game. And
Yeah.
the opportunity wasn't equal. They just happened to be born in America, and they were living in proximity to Ron Paul, and they heard about it and they stumbled into Bitcoin by accident. Or they were dumb and they were junkies and they bought some drugs and then they forgot about their Bitcoin. They came back later and they're like, oh fuck, I got 10,000 Bitcoin. So like, trust me, I've seen some wild ones.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I'm like, bro, I worked my fucking ass off for years, like
You're trading those
scrambling to
shit
buy a
coins.
Bitcoin. Yeah, all of this shit. Like, and God, where is the fairness?
Yeah.
That's
It
life.
just did.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you see Bitcoin in the future? Like, when Bitcoin wins, right? What does it look like for the future, connecting it with these? Because I feel like it's shaping a whole new world. So it is recreating a new hierarchy, a new like unity as well across every single country. So can you like explain what's your vision for the future with Bitcoin, and maybe even like using Bitcoin as, and do you see Bitcoin as the new global financial system, or do you see it as something extra? I just want to see kind of like your vision of the future with all of this.
Well, I have about 100,000 word book coming out on specifically this question. I could start reading from the top, but we'll be here for a while. You ready to do a 10-hour podcast?
Audiobook, let's go.
Yeah, audiobook. No, look, that is precisely the question that I've tried to answer in Bushido of Bitcoin, which is I believe it's going to be my magnum opus. And the question of that book is, all right, let's assume that Bitcoin wins. And if it does win, what the fuck happens then? Do we, as Bitcoiners and as future stewards of the world, because we are going to become socioeconomically elite, do we become the next parasitic class where we just sort of build structures that extract from everybody? Because this could definitely happen. Do we just become a bunch of Louis Vuitton wearing, Lamborghini driving dorks like Richard Hart? Or do we become men and women of virtue? And it's not, some people say, oh, yes, Bitcoin fixes this, and we just become the latter. And I don't think that's true, because I actually know more Bitcoiners that have the derangement syndrome of the middle one. More early Bitcoiners become like Richard Hart than not. So and most people underestimate how much people who have not spent time building virtues inside themselves, and I'll talk about virtues in a second, who have not spent that time building themselves up, people underestimate how much they will change when they come into wealth very quickly. If Bitcoin goes to $1 million tomorrow, I guarantee you, most people will be fucking retarded. Bitcoiners are not.
Yeah.
They will act like overgrown children. So the third category, if that is what we want, so we've got parasite, we've got Louis Vuitton wearing fucking Richard Hart weirdo, or you have men and women of virtue. That third one doesn't just happen. It is something that we actively have to develop, nurture, practice, and inculcate. So then it leads to the question of, all right, well, if it's virtue to become a man or a woman of virtue, what are the virtues we should seek to develop? And what I did was I spent the last couple of years going back and looking at the cultures that preceded the greatest civilizations on Earth. So the Japanese, the you know, the ancient feudal Japanese, the Macedonians, the Greeks, the Romans, you know, the Germanic West, the, you know, early English. I looked at all of those cultures. What were the virtues that made up the DNA of those cultures that allowed civilization to come after? And what I found was a great overlap across all of them. And what I realized is there's only a, you know, a small set of virtues, and then this is true of most things. There's a small set of virtues, a small set of principles to live the good life, quote unquote, or to live righteously, to live virtuously. You know, the etymology of the word virtue means the best, right? And I distilled them down, and Bushido, the word, means way of the warrior in Japanese, and Bushido was the moral code or the code of virtue that the samurai, the warrior class, embodied in order to be really considered a samurai. You know, sure, you're born as a samurai, but to really become a samurai, you sought to live by these 10 virtues, which included, you know, justice, compassion, honor, respect, integrity, self-control, magnanimity, courage, etc. Right? So I, to kind of like in a long-winded way answer your question, is I grappled honestly with a book that is 10 times as long as the Uncommunist Manifesto, like it's a 100,000-word book, on what are these virtues, where do they come from, what is the etymology, both in Japanese culture and also in Western Roman, Latin, English culture. And I look at examples of this, of, you know, great leaders, you know, the Alexander the Greats of the world, the Leonidases of the world, etc. How did they embody these different virtues, and what can we learn from that? And what are, therefore, the 10 virtues? And this is why it's called the Bushido of Bitcoin. It's like, what are the 10 virtues that we should seek to develop, establish, inculcate in ourselves first, and therefore our children, in order to create the civilization that we want? Because that's the whole goal here, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
the question, does Bitcoin impact that? I have like literally 100 pages where I grapple with that. Like I asked, you know, I really asked the question, like, does it actually help or does it not? Like, you know, does wealth actually corrupt, or does it give us the opportunity to build art and beauty and all this sort of stuff? Like, does it make room for virtue, or does it introduce vice, right? So there's a lot here that most Bitcoiners don't think deeply about. They just say, oh yeah, Bitcoin fixes this. They don't fucking
Yeah.
understand why. They don't understand any of that sort of stuff. I look
Yeah.
at, you know, what is the real psychological meaning behind time preference? Like, what does that actually mean, civilizationally speaking, and why
Right.
does that tie back into virtue, beauty, and all this sort of stuff? So anyway, to sort of answer your question, I think it is a very nuanced question, and a more nuanced answer. I do think ultimately Bitcoin does have an impact, because we are economic creatures and we make decisions based on economics, which is a function of our energy and the time we have, which ties back into time preference, which ties back into how your relationship to time has something to do with your relationship to the virtues that you have, like how you live. Like if you're a hedonist, you have a different set of virtues than you have if you are a someone who defines themselves as a, you know, as a conservative, for example, right? So that'll determine the kind of behavior you have, and the kind of behavior you have determines the culture, which determines the civilization, right? So I do think Bitcoin will have a positive impact, but beyond just Bitcoin, there are these this playbook, this rule book, you know, that we need to build and establish for ourselves and for our descendants, basically. And yeah, I think it's going to be a very, very different world. You know, if you like, I can tell you what I think that world will look like, economically and politically speaking, but that's sort of the pre-frame that I have thought about that. It's a beautiful question. I love it. And I have thought deeply about this.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you know, Bitcoin is a tool at the end of the day, and it's amazing. There's so many aspects of it that are incredible, but at the end of the day, it is up to us also to steward that tool in a way.
Exactly.
And I do think we need to think about what direction we want to go in. Like what is this new world that we are wanting to create? What does that look like? And, I think in the Bitcoin community, the areas that kind of like lost me maybe at the beginning were a little bit like, okay, if I'm not a diehard libertarian, then, where do I fit into this, right? And look, there are aspects of libertarianism that I, agree with. Do I think we should have a smaller, more agile system of government? Yes, I do. Productive system of government? Yes, I do. Do I think we should have no government altogether, which really the very extreme
Hardcore guys,
libertarians
yeah.
believe? Well, I don't think that that's a great way to function either. It's not productive for us to do that. So I think there's a real balance there as well. So, and I think that these are decisions that we kind of like need to get on the same page on. And like, how do you see us being able to sort of steer that in that direction? Like, how do you feel
Yes.
influence that?
Yeah. Question.
So this is where I think my theory on feudalism really comes to light, is that one of the unique characteristics of feudalism was that you had many fiefdoms, right? And different lords would run their fiefdom in a different way. Some would tax higher, some would tax lower. Some were more military oriented, some were more agrarian oriented, some were more artisan oriented, etc. So what I believe Bitcoin will do, its economic gravity will force civilization to reorient itself. And what I think is going to happen is we will splinter the world into many, many, many more, call it micronations, or microstates. And we will have that they will be all globally connected, but more locally relevant, right? And this is actually how you rebuild a diverse multicultural world, right? Not multicultural fucking city, but multicultural world where you actually have the ability for within a domain or within a territory, a culture that is unique. It can flourish because the norms are they're homogenous internally and heterogeneous externally, which means we are unlike you on the other side of the wall, but we are like ourselves. We are like valued and like-minded internally, right? So I think the world is going to move more towards that for multiple reasons. One, there are economies of scale and there are diseconomies of scale when running a territory. It makes sense for a particular type of territory to get stronger and more economically viable the larger it gets. But when it reaches a certain size, then it becomes too bloated, the bureaucracy gets hard, the defending the territory gets more difficult. The amount of homogeneity that is a prerequisite for the structural stability of the culture starts to diminish. Like the larger the number gets, the more you have a mix and you get multiculturalism instead of uniculturalism, which is important for a particular domain. So you get all these problems. You also, if you layer that with the size of the territory, both in terms of land size and population size, also varies much. If you have a large flat land, you can have a much larger territory and a much larger population than you can in something that is extremely hilly, for example. You have a different kind of culture in places that are temperate and stay the same in terms of temperature, like, I'm talking about the equator, versus places with high temperature variance. So you have all of these factors that will determine ultimately the economically, culturally, and politically viable size of a territory. And within that territory, there will be different norms, different cultures, different rules, different governance structures that manage them. Some might be more libertarian-like, some might be more fascist-like. Some might be probably more communist-like, but they probably won't work unless they're really, really, really small. So like each of these will operate differently. And I think this solves the problem of we don't actually need unity. Everybody can go to where the fuck they want to go. That makes the most sense. That is the most economically viable. And sure, there'll be bad apples in there. There'll be some places that, act like fucking Kim Jong-il or whatever, and don't let people out or whatever. But the challenge with them is they're going to become less economically viable. And I'm a believer in conquest. if the place is fucking poorly run, poorly operated, etc., the next door neighbor should go and conquer it. Fucking. So like, you know, like there's, you know, I think we'll move more into that kind of a world. And this is why I, yeah, ultimately believe microstates, micronations, way more cultural integrity internally per territory, but diversity externally in the number of territories, different governance structures, more feudalistic in nature, alliances instead of, I mean, you could say alliances and sort of federations, but definitely pendulum will swing away from globalism and one world governments and even large nation states.
I feel like when you're like talking about this, it's as if we're like going back to what we used to be. I feel like the world used to be a bit more like that. Until then, there was a lot of conquering, and now there's these bigger countries, and now we're going to head back to what it used to be. Do you feel like, and before we even, I have so many questions for you in regards to AI, but and your thoughts around that. But before we get to that, do you think that in general, as a humanity, we've gotten smarter, or do you think that there's been this period of we used to be really smart, we've kind of like gotten dumber, and now we're going back to like awakening again and realigning things the way that function, or that function better, if that's the right way of saying that?
No, it's a very good question. I can I read a passage from the Bushido of Bitcoin that might answer this?
Yeah, please.
So I say, so in the introduction, in part one of the book, I say, I've always felt as though I was born in the wrong era. My wife tells me this on a regular basis, and I'm consistently drawn to stories from a time of which only an echo remains, an age of heroism, honor, valor, and hand-to-hand warfare. There is something deeply inspiring about the feats of courage performed by our ancestors. The fact that we made it this far without things like toilets, sanitation, electricity, refrigerators, supermarkets, and the like is mind-boggling if you think about it. Men crossed hundreds of miles on foot with no Nikes or special military footwear, carrying armor, weapons, and supplies on their backs over mountains, valleys, rivers, to challenge each other to fight hand to hand, smelling the very sweat, blood, bile, and excrement of their enemy, and in the process getting stabbed, slashed, and wounded, but still somehow surviving. Overcoming all of that, they went on to build the monumental foundations of the civilization we live in today. Humanity, when viewed through such a lens, is truly awe-inspiring, and it's unfortunate that most people don't appreciate this. And then next I go on to say, much of the corpus of modern anthropohistoric studies suggests that the story of humanity is a progressive one. The general view is that humanity evolved from savagery to barbarism, and then from there on to civilization. In fact, if you ask Francis Fukuyama, in the last few decades, we reached the end of history. We finally transcended our savage roots, and we are now more representative of civilized humans, maybe obedient little pets, who knows? And then, you know, I go on to sort of look at, you know, there's a section here which is probably a little bit relevant. I say, I used to be in the naive camp of the former, which is, you know, history is progress, that the story of humanity has, besides a few troughs along the way, been one of progress. But I've come to reconsider this and cede mental territory to the arguments that civilization is more cyclical. While there has certainly been a general undercurrent of technological progress, the social, structural, and moral fabric that binds us is undoubtedly more cyclical. Sure, we live in a technological golden age, but we also live in a moral, intellectual, emotional, psychological dark age, a perspective that more and more people are beginning to agree with, not least because of the growing amount of supporting evidence. So this is precisely what you are touching on, is that are we actually I don't know if smarter is the, you know, the right framing, because, you know, one might argue that materially speaking we are far better further ahead and therefore we are smarter, but you know what, psychologically I don't think we're stronger. I don't think we're emotionally as mature as we used to be. You know, intellectually I guess also we are far less curious. Now the thing is, it's, you know, the argument here is that there are extremes today, and like we live in an age of real extremism where if you are part of the intellectual 1%, and I'm not talking about, you know, fucking Warren Buffett or Christine Lagarde, I'm talking about the intellectual 1%, which probably lives on Twitter, honestly, is like this kind of like really sharp frog Twitter that is like, you know, pointing out all the stupidity and all that sort of stuff, like you are probably intellectually far superior to anything that came before you. But the general middle of the bell curve is so fucking dumb at this point, that, you know, you compare that with the prior bell curve, you know, from days gone by where people were more intuitive. Like I noticed, you know, you call this the Bitcoin Zodiac. Like there's so much wisdom, you know, in that. Like we understood the stars, we understood, you know, blood, divinity, we understood, like, you know, family, tribe, and all this sort of stuff. We've forgotten all of that shit. So in that sense, we've fundamentally gotten dumber. So that's why, like, I think it's a very tricky thing to answer. But yeah, it's simultaneously a golden age and a dark age at the same time, and it's really frustrating because you've got people on one side of the camp saying it's the best fucking time to be alive. Then you got, you know, ultra black pill people. It's like it's the fucking worst time, when it's kind of like a strange mix of both.
But do you think,
Very
I
good.
think society has more been domesticated, and I think that
Totally,
there's
yeah.
been a conscious effort to do that. So there's elements where we live better, we're more hygienic, we, you know, all of those sorts of things, but we've been severely like pacified and domesticated, and we've given up so much for the sake of convenience and ease. I think it's kind of coming back to the point that I sort of said earlier, that we'll do anything to avoid a little bit of pain, no matter how much of a mess that creates to navigate around that. So it's crazy. But
Comfort society.
before we move into the AI side of things, which I'm super excited to get into with you, it kind of is a good segue actually, but I'm just interested to understand your perspective on, like, on the nation state, on a nation state, and how that looks as we progress further into this digital age. And so you've talked about, I agree with you as well, in terms of like smaller communities, like more living together and creating these sort of smaller communities that work together locally. And I'm sort of wondering what that looks like for you in the digital age in terms of the nation state, the definition of a nation state at that time. And like even now, what really defines a nation state for you in general? Like, is it the weapons or is it the wealth that really sort of keeps that nation state together and sort of protects that nation state?
I mean, that's a tough one. It's a blend of all of the above, right? So there's like the military, the borders that have been largely defined over the last century, post World War II in particular. The kind of the blood memory and the relationship to the land. A lot of, and this is, you know, I was a nomad for many years, and I think I've come to believe that nomading is mostly scammy. It's like it's good for a period of your life, but it's like it's really dumb because you want to have some roots to territory. Like we are territorial creatures in our DNA, in our blood. Like you want to have like place, and if, you know, we were speaking at the when I first jumped on the call, like there's things we miss about Australia. Do you know what it really is that we miss about Australia? We lived there for a while, we were born there or something like that, and that sort of thing is really what you're missing, not the government retards, right? Like so
Absolutely
it's
not.
that
Why none of us live there.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
So what's keeping the concept of a nation state together is this mix of the money printer and the central bank, you know, the military industrial complex that they do have, which every country does to some degree, but like, you know, not a lot. And then the shared, you know, if you ask a dickhead like Yuval Harari, he'll be like, it's the shared illusion of a nationality. Well, it's beyond the shared illusion. It's the shared bond to the soil and to the bloodlines that came before that give you some sort of relationship. So that still exists. In saying that, over a long enough time frame, those the relationship to the soil and the territories that demarcate the soil evolved. We had the Roman Empire, we had you know, micronations, we went through, you know, all sorts of different periods. We went through this phase, and, you know, obviously the what's the book? Sovereign Individual talks quite a lot about, is like how the modern nation state emerged, because there was a myriad of there was a confluence of different things that came together, which was taxation, fiat money, weaponry, all this sort of stuff that made it such that these larger armies could be built, these larger economies could be built, and we could build the modern nation state. I think that's going to change. I think, as I said, economically speaking, Bitcoin will force territories to operate more in an economically viable manner. If you can't print money, you got to make money. And if the territory is too big to make money, you got to make the territory smaller. And you make the territory smaller, you can self-determine. So, for example, if New South Wales thinks they can run better than Victoria, New South Wales should self-determine that and let the Victorians do something else. Like they should all sort of compete. And we all know like competition in the marketplace is a good thing because then you get choice, you get variance, and you get a forcing function towards things getting better. So I think that's where it goes. I don't know how long it takes to get there. I think, you'll have a mixture of a grassroots movement, which is these rising communities that become stronger and more important. You have this sort of free cities movement that is happening. You have some smaller countries like your El Salvadors of the world where you have a good philosopher king, someone like Bukele come out and just fucking mandate it from the top. And that is fantastic. You'll have this sort of like blend of the two, and it'll pop up around the world. And yeah, over generations, we're not going to live to see it, but over multiple generations, the fabric of the nation state, the story of the current nation state is going to change. And what we'll have in the future is different, and it'll be fundamentally more micronation, microstate variant. So I don't know if that's just me repeating what I said earlier, but like, and I don't know if I've answered the exact nuance you've asked me, but
Oh, it is. I think it's just more a case of like I just can see sort of that these definitions of these nation states at some point they're already not really fit for purpose. You know what I mean? Like our governments are not really fit for purpose. They're already becoming irrelevant. They can't keep up with the progress of the digital age. Even when you look at crypto and things like this,
yeah, that too.
they're already becoming sort of irrelevant.
Yeah.
People are sick of paying super high taxes. And so it's like, how does that progress? I think, how does that
Yeah,
evolve?
that's a very good question as well, actually. So that is slightly different to what I was saying before. So that this is
Mm.
more the question of the mismatch between cyberspace basically and physical space. And yeah, that's a tricky one because these two things live at a different pace, right? So
Yeah.
imagine like you've got two things that are kind of connected, and one thing is moving at 10 kilometers an hour, and the other thing is moving at 1,000 kilometers an hour. The thing that's moving at 1,000 kilometers an hour doesn't have a lot of weight, so it's kind of like it wants to move, and it's kind of dragging this like slow, cumbersome thing behind it. But we need them both. So it is a very, very, very tricky thing because current governance lives primarily in the old domain and is not caught up with the new domain. So actually, funny enough, we will have to do a podcast on this in the future. So I'm actually working on a project called Satlantis, which is specifically trying to address the concept of emerging grassroots call it network states, and using Bitcoin and Nostr and social graph and everything like that. So it's something I've been working on for like the last 4 or 5 months in stealth. Going to be making some announcements about this in the coming months, but I'm shifting all of our AI resources and everything into that project because I think it's like 100x bigger. But yeah, I'll share some stuff with you ladies after this about it, but we'll probably have to have a conversation about that because that's a whole fucking topic. Like, what does that look like? How does that change things? What does that mean, etc.?
Yeah, because I think at the moment we're really in a battle at the moment for, it's like globalist versus nationalist. Whereas for me, I'm kind of like, I'm not really into either of these. I really believe that the strength of the society is in the strength of the individuals and then their contribution to the community. So it's like it's more these sort of small cells, I guess, that are strong in their own right, and then what they contribute to the collective, right? And I just don't see that really represented in our current system of governance, really, and the way that we operate. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But let's dive into Spirit of Satoshi, because I'm super excited about this. I really wanted to get you on the podcast after I'd read one of your articles that you wrote about AI. And it was kind of in the midst of the time where, ChatGPT had been out for a while, a couple of months or something like that. And people were losing it. Like, AI is going to take over the world. It's going to kill us all. And Corinne and I were like talking on the podcast going, well, I don't think it's going to replace like human consciousness. And you wrote this article basically saying something similar. And I was like, thank God somebody else is saying this. So let's go from there. Where do you see this go? Where do you see AI going and its impact on humanity?
Yeah. Thank you. You see, you ladies have the right intuition. And then, I went in there and just did a rational, logical explanation. I have a fraction of the intuition that you girls have. And my intuition was, all of this is fucking a bunch of nerds having wet dreams about, having sex with AI dolls, basically. So literally what it is, like it's Yuval Harari's wet dream to be, bondaged by AI god, basically. That's what he wants. He wants to be. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Before I get carried away. So the AI is just another word for automation. There's no intelligence here. It is a misnomer. The only reason why the word intelligence could slightly be important is that some of these automations emulate in some capacity the methods that we understand humans take in order to solve problems. So to that extent, these programs essentially emulate intelligence, and their function is to create automation around pattern recognition, around pattern production as well from the pattern recognition. And the only thing that's really happened is because this AI stuff has been around for ages. Like Uber analyzes patterns of people who are trying to book a ride and drivers who are giving a ride, and they match them. So that is pattern recognition and then decision making off that pattern recognition. All we've done with language models is we have figured out that language is made up largely by patterns, and therefore we have learned to codify language. We've learned to codify letters, words, and sentences basically into what's called vectors, which are numbers that exist on a multi-dimensional mathematical space. And by creating these vectors, we've been able to assign a numerical value to their meaning. And therefore, we've been able to apply the law of large numbers, or pattern recognition and pattern production, which is machine learning, or AI that it's commonly called, to language. And the result is these products or programs or tools that you type something in and they speak back to you. That's essentially, if we took all the magic and the fluff out of it, that's really what it is. And the nerds, obviously, because prior to ChatGPT, the only thing that we'd spoken to was a parrot. And all of a sudden we went from a parrot to a program, and we're like, oh my God, it's gonna take over the world, it's alive, and all this sort of shit. It's like, people literally asking questions like, oh, are you alive? Yes, I am. Like, oh my God. So this is how fucking retarded everybody is. But I can categorically say I've been building this stuff myself with the team. There is nothing magical about this. It is all law of large numbers. It is not conscious. It is not intelligent by any stretch of the imagination. It is not sentient at all. There's no path to sentience here. I'm sorry for all the AGI freaks. It's just not going to happen. There is something substantively different about humans that you can't emulate through machinery. And I don't know what that is. I don't think any of us will ever know what it is, but it's call it the spark of life, whatever. That's that little piece, that anomaly, is something that is unique to living things, and no amount of circuitry is going to get us there. So, other than emulating it. And, someone might say, well, you don't know the difference between emulating and reality because nobody can prove one or the other. Sure, maybe. But the thing about humans, so like the ultimate joke is still on the nerds, is that let's just give them the benefit of the doubt that the special spark doesn't exist and that everything is just, you know, we are like the perfect general machine because we can do all these sort of things and everything that we do is just programmatic. If you think about Yuval Harari, we are biological machines. If we give them the benefit of the doubt on that, the joke is still on the nerds in the sense that if you could start to string together a bunch of different AIs, something for language, something for movement, something for this pattern recognition, this, that, what you end up getting is the necessity to create governing agents to try and govern stuff, which slows the system down. And then because there are so many potential things a human could do, you stack multiple governing agents on and you end up bloating the system. And if you could somehow say it's like, oh, okay, well, look, you know, in 100 years, we'll be way more, you know, energy efficient and all this sort of stuff. And we'll be able to minimize the amount of energy and mass required to still produce those things. My argument is that fast forward 100, 500, 1,000 years on that path, the ultimate AI that you would finally get is something that looks very much like a human being, because it is generally good at everything. Human beings can think, we can do math, we can drive a car. If we get cut, we can heal, we can jump, we can sit, we can have sex, we can ride, we can do all of these things, and we're generally good at a bunch of them. And the very nature of existence, the very nature of life understands that you can't do one thing. Like if you are generally alive and intelligent, you can't just do one thing 100% better than like at the exclusion of everything else. So ultimately you have to get some sort of generalization in the entity, and that the generalization fundamentally means the individual dimension of competence is going to be dampened in order to make room for generality. So like ultimately, if the nerds could, like if we were just perfect biological machines, if the nerds could get AI, they would end up getting back to humans, which means instead of fucking around with all of this stuff, just go have babies. Literally, just go have sex and have a baby.
Easier.
Like that's literally all these people need to do. But they're all virgins and they've never had sex before. They've never seen a vagina and they think that they can create it in a computer. They're losers. So I'm sorry, but AI is nothing to be afraid of. This, yeah, it's.
But do you think the fear, it kind of is like reminding me back of what we were talking about previously. I kind of feel like this, you know, evolution of AI is really like a call for humanity to upgrade and actually step into more of our like more human faculties of creation, of, you know, that kind of thing. And so I think that this fear actually comes from this like domestic race that we've created, this domestic species that we've created, in that we've kind of lost an element of our humanness and we've tied up our entire self-worth in productivity. And so I think that the people that maybe do need to be fearful of AI are the people who only define themselves as product, you know, their whole worth is tied up in being productive, because AI is going to shit all over you basically if that's all you've got to bring to the table.
If you think you're a biological machine, if you think you're just a pattern recognition agent, if you're an NPC, you're in trouble. So like I coined the term midwit obsolescence technology, which is what I believe AI is. If you're a fucking midwit, you're in trouble, because, you know, the best an AI can do is replicate, like it can interpret patterns, it can replicate them, and if all you can do is just pattern stuff, you're fucked. So like if you're an actual sentient human being, if you're not one of the NPCs, you know, if you've got like, it is the best time to be alive, because fundamentally, like, comes back to what I said earlier. It's like AI is just, it's just a modern version of automation. It is the fucking go back 300 years when we started automating you know, the textile industry. That's what AI is.
Yeah.
So if you couldn't think of any differently, like, you know, you definitely got replaced by the sewing machine. That's all, you know, you need to think about this. So basically you get to outsource the boring shit that you don't want to do. And that's fantastic. And if you're just a loser that all you can do is the boring shit because you think you're a machine, that Yuval Harari just told you you're a biological machine and you have no agency and you have no free will, then sure, at that point, you're no better than an NPC is like, again, it's literally no better than a language model or an AI, and therefore midwit obsolescence technology will make you obsolete. And for those of us who have some sort of agency, who have some sort of opinion, who have some sort of thumos and spark and life and free will or whatever, or who to once again give them the benefit of the doubt, at least those of us who think we do, let's say Yuval is right, those of us who think we do will still be different enough than the models and the automation tools. That's what we should really call it. We should call these things automation tools. It's not AI, it's automation tools. They're not alive. They're different. So yeah, fundamentally, what you're saying is 100% correct. Claire, it's literally nothing to be afraid of. It's literally the best thing that could possibly happen. And yeah, if you're concerned about it, it says more about you than it says about what's happening.
Yeah. I think here at the Bitcoin Zodiac, we most definitely are excited about AI. We think it's great. We think it's going to take so much. It's going to free up so much time. That's like really a big part of what I'm seeing, and just allowing us to step back into, and probably forcing the world, like forcing everybody to go back to those higher human faculties, stepping more into our creativity, stepping back into our intuition, which are a lot of things that I feel like have really disappeared. And so you really think that because I am by no means, like I'm still at the start of learning about AI and how it works and all of that. So you really don't think that in the future, like AI could possibly, like iRobot, the Matrix, like machineries they just can't do that. Cool. I just needed that confirmation. Thank you.
Yeah. Highly doubt, like, I mean, I have the funny thing is, like, usually when you start digging into something and learning about something and, getting into it, your belief level goes up. My belief level has done nothing but go down the more I've been in this. I'm like, this is a fucking total nerd fantasy. It's just not going to happen. Like, I mean, that doesn't mean that we won't have sophisticated programs, sophisticated models, sophisticated stuff that'll automate a bunch of things. But the iRobot stuff and like the Matrix stuff is a fantasy for a reason. There needs to be a programmer, and that's humans.
We were all raised watching Terminator, and it's like
exactly.
We've been programmed by that too.
I mean, it's not that Terminator can't happen. Actually, I'll just quickly say is like, so the accident that is Terminator could happen not because the machine is sentient, but because the programming that like, this is the thing about programming. Like, why do computer programs have bugs? It's because you cannot, as a human being, know all of the potential ways, all of the potential things that a program could potentially do. This is why Ethereum and all the shitcoins break, is because Ethereum, for example, is Turing complete. There is no way to predetermine everything that could happen when you press play on the program, and therefore it is not a good money, because Ethereum will always, it's not it's going to break 80% of the time. No, it'll always 100% of the time, it is guaranteed to fucking break because it is Turing complete. So any kind of program that is Turing complete, that is, this complex, will always have bugs. So the Terminator scenario could potentially happen, not because the machine is sentient, but because the way it's programmed, or whatever, whatever fucking megalomaniac decides that it's a good idea to have, robot security guards everywhere that, operate by a specific set of rules. And then it's like, oh, oops, fuck, we didn't think of that. And it's, now it's like, anything that it determines is not human is now dead. And it's like, well, you're not human because you didn't get vaccinated. Oh, fuck. And then, whatever, right? So there's all sorts of weird shit that can happen as an accident because the nerds want to play God. And that's where things get dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
Who's in charge of that, actually.
Always, exactly.
Yeah. So tell us about Spirit of Satoshi. How were you inspired to create this, and what sort of drove you in that direction? Why did you think we needed it?
So for me, it was a research project. So I started going down this LLM rabbit hole. I thought there was something more here, genuinely. The more I dug into it, the more I realized that there wasn't much. But still, during the phase where I really thought there was something special here, I was like, man, we could build like a Bitcoin model, like something that tells you inflation is bad, that can be used as educational utility and all this sort of stuff. You know, in the beginning, I was a little bit more, you know, fuzzy and starry-eyed about it. Like I thought, you know, there was so much potential for this and everything like that. Where I am now is that I just view it as a cool utility that hopefully, you know, if people need to answer Bitcoin questions or whatever, they can go to it and they will get a better, clearer, more accurate understanding of what the hell Bitcoin is. Without all the fluff, without all the shitcoining, without all the confusion. Also, you know, as a tool, you know, maybe Bitcoin companies might plug it into their thing. Maybe Bitcoin podcast people might, like, you know, at the end of each show, you know, ask a question, you know, have it, like, I don't know, whatever. Like we're going to end up open sourcing it and just putting it out there for people to use. And then they can do whatever they want with it. But ultimately, the goal here is a Bitcoin utility that is education oriented. So all call it a Bitcoin education utility, something that is more trained along the lines of Austrian economics, Bitcoin, you know, and the stuff that make it special, so that the kind of response is out from there. Because ultimately, like, you know, another good way to sort of frame what language models are is they are conversational search engines. That's probably a good way to think about it. Is it's something that you can communicate with, and it's like it's not entirely accurate because they don't really function like search engines. They don't index and they don't pull up stuff. But by the nature of aggregating all of the content and creating the neural weights and the probabilities inside the thing, it almost functions like a condensed search engine. So it's not an exact analogy, but it kind of works like that. And you know, there's stuff that you can do by storing data in particular databases that, you know, get it to retrieve. So you got like retrieval augmentation that you can do. But without getting into the technicals here, it's kind of like a conversational search engine. And there's a lot of stuff that's been written and said about Bitcoin. And instead of you trawling through the internet and Google and all this sort of stuff to try and get the answer and try and figure it out, you would save some time, ideally, going to something like Spirit of Satoshi, at least in the domain of Bitcoin. And I mean, we're trying to make it more based, like, you know, we're trying to teach it that if you ask about did Epstein kill himself, it'll be like, it was the government. So, you know, that's just for shits and giggles, but we're trying to make it a little bit more based. So beyond just Bitcoin, it'll be like a Bitcoiner, ideally.
Okay, cool. So yeah, because I think one of the interesting things, like that was one of the things that I first asked ChatGPT when it came out, and what it
What, did
spat
Epstein
out
kill himself, or?
no,
About
but about
Oh,
Bitcoin.
okay.
No, not about Epstein actually, but close. So that's actually good. I should look up some conspiracy theories in this and see what the answers are. But it was very much, you could kind of tell
Wikipedia, right?
it was taught about you know, it was taught in the same way as whoever's, you know, filtering Google, basically. It was from that perspective, very Silicon Valley perspective of Bitcoin. And so yeah, when you said Spirit of Satoshi, now it seems to have changed as the updates have gone along, and it seems to be they maybe uploaded the Bitcoin white paper at some point and actually had some facts about Bitcoin. But I think it's good as well to have sort of an untainted sort of record where people can actually go if they want to know from Bitcoiners what Bitcoin is about.
Totally. That's the whole premise here. You know, if we can stay true to that and keep that in there, I think that's going to be useful.
Yeah. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future in terms of censorship and things like that, because I think that's always more my fear rather than AI taking over, is it's really like who's teaching these AIs, you know, because that's really the perspective it's going to come from. And, you know, even Googling is now really a verb, and people think that if I put a question into Google, I'm getting all of the answers. They don't, you know, you don't sort of think about, oh, I'm going to get I'm actually getting a filtered version of all of the answers, a
Yeah, I mean,
version, you know, and so I think it's good to have that balance.
yeah, we all used to look at, like, you know, the second page or third page of Google to find results. Now it's like, it's not even the first three results. It's like literally the first result. It's like, okay, that is the truth. Do I get vaccinated? Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
Check. You know, like,
exactly.
so yeah, so what you're saying is spot on. Like, and look, the only way to combat that is through market competition. Like, so those who don't want to get their information from a single source, I mean, that's why DuckDuckGo exists, you know, to some degree. You know, you have an alternative to Google, right? So you want to have an alternative to ChatGPT. Now, does that mean there's going to be, you know, a globally used Bitcoin model that everybody goes to? Probably not. I don't think the theme is broad enough. You know, there was I wanted to buy the domain Chad GPT, just to fuck with ChatGPT at one point. It was just too expensive. I couldn't hack spending 100 grand on it. But yeah, ChatGPT, I was gonna like do it as like a based ChatGPT model that, like, you know, everything you ask it, it kind of gives you like a right-wing answer. I'm sure there will be a model like that that becomes, you know, more mainstream-ish. But yeah, I don't know if I have the patience to build that, particularly considering what I want to do with Atlantis. So yeah, at this point, Spirit of Satoshi, community utility, community education utility. It is also going to, once we get the next model built up a little bit further, we're probably going to use it to power Spirit of Satoshi on both Twitter and Nostr, so that way people can always like have it there to ask questions and all that sort of stuff. And we will use it to produce basically beginner-friendly literature. So, you know, we started off with the 21 questions, the general book, which is which people can pre-order now. Like, and basically it's designed to be a super easy to read beginner's book, because when someone comes into Bitcoin, what do they have? They have questions. So we took from all the training that we did on the model, we took the most, we did some actual data science on taking the thousands of questions that we trained the model on, distilling it down to the most common, pertinent, and useful questions for beginners in general to, you know, get their first taste of why Bitcoin. And what we did was, you know, each chapter is a question, and then within each chapter, you have multiple answers, one from the model and a whole suite of answers from different Bitcoin influencers or different Bitcoin thinkers. So you've got like Thomas Stroller, you have Giacomo Zucco, you have Guy Swan, you have Knut Svanholm, you have Breedlove, you have all these people who've like contributed answers. So that way, the way the book is designed is you can open it to any page and you see the question at the top, and then there's a dedicated answer for that question. So like it's a perfect newbie book, because it just gets to the heart of, like, instead of explaining Bitcoin, history of money and all this fucking shit, it's like, boom, here's your answer. And we're gonna do like a whole series of these books. So there'll be 21 questions, like the, you know, the FUD edition, 21 questions, the Lightning edition, so people can understand the Lightning Network, 21 questions, the I don't know, the Nostr edition, 21 questions, the energy edition. I'd also like to do 21 questions beyond sort of just Bitcoin stuff. So like maybe a homeschooling edition, maybe we can do a Zodiac edition together if you girls want to, like, you know, sort of, you know, and have like a whole range of these 21 questions books that people, you know, who are interested in particular topics can, you know, get information from, which is a blend of the repositories that these language models are, along with you know, human beings that contribute to it, and you know, you get this nice, beautifully designed book, which is, yeah, what we produced. And you know, if anyone is interested in picking it up, you can get it like half price now if you go on Geyser dot fund, yeah, Geyser.fund, and you can pre-order it now. Well, we're doing like a crowdfund for it.
I'll put that link in the show notes for sure, because I'm sure people would be interested, because I think that is one of the things with Bitcoin is like, it's one of the things I never expected with Bitcoin was that it was gonna, I thought it would be like, I'll read one book, I'll get the fundamentals and I'll understand. Whereas actually, the more I dug into Bitcoin, the more questions I had for myself. Like, it really challenged my own values and my own beliefs in a lot of different things. And so I think it's really hard when you've been around Bitcoin for a while and you meet someone that's completely brand new. It's like, where do I even
I
start?
know, yeah. Where do I start?
Living on a
Totally. I had this
completely
problem
different
today.
planet to you. And,
Yeah.
you know, so I think this is amazing what you're doing to be able to just like have something that people can just go to straight away. And it's really awesome. And I mean, obviously on this podcast, you can tell that we're all pretty long-term bullish on Bitcoin, very long-term bullish on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you, because I like to ask people who have a like really intimate understanding of Bitcoin, is like, what's your kind of counter thesis to Bitcoin? Like, what would change your position, your bullish position on Bitcoin? What would you have to see in the world, or something or some things, to change your position on Bitcoin? How does Bitcoin fail, in other words? Because the only people I ever hear, I want to check my own biases. The only people that I ever hear that have counter arguments to Bitcoin, they're like ridiculous, like quoting headlines from 2015.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they're all
You know what I
retards, yeah.
mean? Like, oh, if the internet went down, then what would happen to your Bitcoin? It's like, great, guys, like, thanks. You know,
Mhm.
so what in the world would happen that you would change your position on Bitcoin, or could happen?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin's too much of an economic beast to fail at this point, economically speaking. So I think that bridge has been crossed. If anything, I think it's more like, does just humanity fail with or without Bitcoin, right? So, we get Bitcoin and we're just a bunch of fat shits living in pods. Sure, we've got a bit like, basically we burn the world down. So it's like Bitcoin wins. Like, so it's kind of like, there's this, there was a ancient general who was ancient Macedonian general who fought against the Romans, and in his first battle, he beat the Romans, but he had so many casualties on his own side that the army barely survived. So it's called a Pyrrhic victory. His name was Pyrrhus. So like we could have a Pyrrhic victory with Bitcoin, which is, civilization burns down around us, and everything is all fucking retarded. We have a bunch of Baltimore Bridge situations, everything's crashing, burning, and everyone's all fucked up. And it's like, yeah, we won. Bitcoin. And it's like, what people forget to realize is that Bitcoin measures the wealth of civilization. But if civilization has no wealth, if we're living in one big fucking Somalia, then congratulations, we've won a Pyrrhic victory. So that would be my, biggest concern, is that we let the clowns basically destroy the world around us and do nothing. Like, and this is one of the big dangers of the retards who are like, oh, yeah, just buy Bitcoin and chill. Or just stay on and, just like make memes on Twitter and do nothing with my fucking life. Like most of those people are losers. I think really what we need to do is be building shit, because in some way, shape, or form, like you want to be able to you want Bitcoin to actually measure real wealth. And real wealth is, what the world is made up of. And I've gone back and forth on this. Sometimes I thought, look, the
I
Ayn
knew you
Rand
would
thing,
have.
like the whole the whole John Galt, right? Like the Atlas Shrugged. It's like, do you just walk away and let the lights turn off? Because the more good people like us keep working, the more we are the ones keeping the lights on. And sometimes it's better to just like let the thing fall and then turn it back on again. And I don't know what the right answer there is, honestly. Like it's a really tough question. Ayn Rand literally wrote Atlas Shrugged to grapple with that question. It's like, what happens when the clowns take over the world? Well, slowly by slowly, everything disintegrates. And that is literally what we're seeing. We're seeing a real life version of Atlas Shrugged happening. And, are we just prolonging the stupidity and giving the parasites more rope to fuck everything up with by continuing working? And maybe that is the case. Maybe I'm the idiot that's deluded by trying to build businesses and trying to build alternatives. But I get the sense that I'm not. I get the sense that at least building stuff that is incompatible with the existing system is probably the way to go. Because at least it doesn't help the existing system, and it creates like an alternative, like something parallel or different, that as shit does start to fall apart, people can jump over there. And that's actually, ties back into this Atlantis project that I'm working on. Is I hope that to be a incompatible project that is doing something that the status quo can't benefit from, but that the rest of us as Bitcoiners and sentient human beings can benefit from. So yeah, it's a tough one. But yeah, that's how I would answer it. It's like we lose if we win a Pyrrhic victory.
Right. Yeah, so we take what's beautiful and what we've created, but there's nothing left. We're just left there holding our seed phrase, and the world is burnt down around us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay, that's a great answer. Did you have any other questions, Corinne?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, is there anything else that maybe we haven't touched on today, or a final message that, people that maybe are even just getting started in this space? Because I feel like a lot of people have heard of Bitcoin now, but maybe are like scared to get involved, or just a general message to wrap things up that you would say to everyone?
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you both. This was a great conversation. You two have excellent chemistry and dynamism on your show, so I appreciate a good host or a good series of hosts. So thank you for that. I want to maybe the best way to wrap it up is actually back to Claire's comment earlier, which is I think people who are in Bitcoin have been around for a while. Like as you said, we're sort of so far down the rabbit hole. We're living on a different planet or a galaxy right now, and I just don't I don't know how to relate to normies anymore. And when people ask me about Bitcoin anymore, I'm like, I don't know anything. I just don't even talk about it. Whereas, you know, the whole point of why we wrote this whole 21 questions book, and, you know, if people have felt themselves in a similar way, like, you know, 21 questions hopefully might be a resource for people that it's like, you know, just buy a 10 or a 20 pack and just like anyone asks you about Bitcoin, it's like, I know nothing. Yeah, read this. And just like let the book do the fucking talking. But yeah, I mean, the only other thing I'd say is like I hope that what I've offered, I try to do this on every podcast, is like a nuanced view on things, that things aren't as straight or as clear cut as they appear to be. That yeah, if people want to follow me on Twitter or whatever, that's where I'm going to be doing most of my tirades. And I'm actually going to start, I think I'm going to start using Instagram again, particularly with Bushido of Bitcoin coming out in the next couple of months. And yeah, if people are really interested in that side of things, like the virtues, culture, civilization, etc., then I think my plan is to make it the second most read Bitcoin book after Bitcoin Standard, because I don't think I'm going to be safe in at this stage. But I think he, you know, basically his book sets the thesis for why, you know, what is Bitcoin and what is Bitcoin Standard. And then I'm like, okay, well, if we get a Bitcoin Standard, then what do we fucking do with it? And then that's sort of like the next question. And that's what I'm going to hope to answer with Bushido of Bitcoin. So yeah,
We'd
I'll
love
leave
to
it there,
invite you
and
back when
thank you
you're
once
ready
again.
to release that book and have a deeper dive into that as well, because I think it goes hand in hand, you know, these like virtues and, you know, how we live, how we align ourselves, how we orientate ourselves is, you know, we have Bitcoin, we've established this, but you know, what do we do after that? And there's only so much you can dive into the tech or the, you know, okay, great, we can make money doing this, and there has to be another layer. I mean, for me anyway, it's
Human element.
it's too flat for me. Like there has to be more depth to it. So I love that you're writing this, and we'd love to hear more about it when you're ready.
Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the value today, for answering our questions, and definitely looking forward to having you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.